The girl in the basement. Not this time. I want to tell a different story here. Jeanette had a unique relationship with her mom. They spent a lot of time together, taking care of sick relatives and taking long car rides at times. It was something the other siblings didn't get a lot of. One-on-one interaction with Jeannie, alone, like this. And this memory, it sticks out to Jeanette. She remembers driving with her mom, as adults. They were headed to La Belle from the St. Louis airport, going to take care of Grandma Howard, Jeannie's mom. They're in the car, and Jeanette was driving. Jeannie was telling her daughter a story about the time she was choking on a carrot. Jeanette says as they were traveling through small farming towns, they passed a man lying in the grass, boots up, sprawled out, face up, palms up, and not moving. It was out in the country, along the highway. Jeanette yelled at her mom that the man may need help, that he could be dead. She says Jeannie never broke her story, waving her arms, animated, as she talked about choking on this carrot. Jeanette says she interrupted her mom a few times while calling the highway patrol. Jeannie paused, and then, she was ready to finish her story when Jeanette got off the phone. Jeanette says she was shaking with concern, but her mom had zero concern.
Mom, I'm sorry. I've got to make a phone call. There is a man. Back there, Mom. There's a man.
This story is another example of things logged in Jeanette's brain as weird. And stories like these, where they're alone, I have to take her word for it. Jeanette has typed this story, sent it to me. She told me this story in person, and I later asked her to record this story for me so I could hear it one more time. And it's consistent. Always consistent. There's no one to ask to corroborate these little strange behavior stories like this. All I can do is try the best I can to get a consistent version of a story. And I know it wears on Jeanette. When we first met during that nearly 7-hour interview, I would ask her a story. I would jump to the middle, the end, ask her to tell me the first part again. She knew the drill. It's all I had until I could find people to interview, go through the 1,000 emails to help Jeanette tell this crazy, long, crazy, scary, crazy story. She went through it with the FBI on a much bigger scale. Simple interrogation. And I was doing it too. It's where you have to start. And it's hard on her. She has said to me a couple of times that others in this Jeannie circle, they just kind of get to tell their story. But with her, she's drilled, questioned, digging for documents, always having to prove what happened to her. She's not mad. She gets it. But it's frustrating to her all the same. And I know it's exhausting. And you have to understand just how many times Jeanette has started over, telling this story, trying to get someone to listen and doing whatever they asked at any cost. And it's mainly money and her sanity. Like the very first private investigator in Ottumwa when Jeannie was missing so much money. Mark Nozak, the main private investigator in this story in Utah. The police detective in Kirksville when she tried to get her dad's body exhumed on her own. Detective Bennett in Utah. Then, years with the FBI. Dateline, crime writer Michelle McNamara. Attorneys during Family Number 3's battle in civil court. Another PI firm to try and find the babysitter. And she recorded herself telling her own story just 1 month before finding the Toll podcast.
Hi, it's May 5th, 2020, and I am starting the most brave thing I've ever done in my life, which is to tell this story. So the purpose of this is not only that I've heard once a story is told, you can let it go, which it's time for me to let it go, but also because I have a duty. We'll start with when I was in college, I went to Brigham Young University, and it was a beautiful college. I finally did get something, though. I got a care package in the mail. I found out he had died while he was jogging or something. The sheriff had come to the door and said, Jeannie, we found Denny. He's in a ditch. I'll share the rest another night. But I wanted to get the story started, and we are about 2% into the story. So good night.
She got a little over 40 minutes in and gave up. And then me. Years later, she's compelled to start over with me. And we've been at this for years. Anyway, I'm convinced Jeannie was telling Jeanette a story about a time she was choking on a carrot. Previously on The Toll. Poison. Control.
I was just in shock that she was giving the middle finger to the authorities right under their nose.
What I really wanted was something concrete, just like something that would actually put her in jail.
I need you to listen. There are cases that are won all the time with circumstantial evidence.
It was good advice that I kept until my sister got so ill that I had to throw it to the wind, and I had to talk to my sister because she was dying.
I'm an award-winning journalist who has spent decades chasing stories and investigating cases across the Ozarks. It's tragic, really.
I don't believe in coincidence.
We all have a story.
Nobody was able to make it because everybody was sick.
A dark secret wrapped in emptiness and regret.
Within a year, her entire nuclear family died.
You know.
Tons and tons of chemicals.
The Toll. I'm Nancy Simpson. We pick back up with Jeannie getting ready for her mission trip. An email from February 2011. FBI investigation done. Civil case by family number 3, Bruce's family. Done. And Jeannie and Jeanette are right back at it. It's back and forth. Jeannie offering all kinds of letters of support written by friends that she submitted to the FBI as evidence of good character. Jeannie saying she thinks things got bad between them because of Roy's crazy brain, her taking Darvocet for fibromyalgia, her reaction to the narcotic, how she was blamed for Jim's death, Dennis's death, and outlines a story about the Easter candy that was sent from her house and later tested positive for arsenic. Jeannie ends with, I know I did some things that made me look suspicious to Bruce's kids, such as get a lawyer, but I didn't want the bodies exhumed. I knew that would take about a year at least, and I wanted the FBI to talk to me and listen to my evidence and even give me a lie detector test before they started digging up bodies, so I didn't sign. I had my mission papers in, and I wanted to go ahead and leave then and not have to wait around for more than a year for the FBI. Jeanette comes back on how she panicked after the suspicious salt incident. March 2012. I see Jeanette is upset that her mother is planning on moving within a few miles of Denise to help her as she battles stage 4 breast cancer. Denise has 4 children now, all under the age of 8. August 2012. Jeannie meets a man with the last name Sykes on her Mormon mission in San Diego and decides to stay there instead of moving close to Denise. Then, within 3 months, they're married. Jeanette freaks out. She's so afraid for this man, for his health, for his life, for his family. She panicked and called a newspaper in California. Maybe they could, do a story, set off an alarm, somehow get a message to this man, write a letter to his family in the paper. She doesn't know. She just doesn't want anyone else to get sick. She talks to a reporter who takes her info, quickly realizes what's being described as a Black Widow case, and goes to the top. Here's the email, December 4th, 2012. Dear Jeanette, I hope I find you well. My name is Jennifer, and I'm a producer with Good Morning America. I was sent your contact information by my colleague and supervisor, who asked that I look into your story and reach out to you. Here we go again. They talk on the phone, and Jeanette later writes, Dear Jennifer, I didn't sleep well last night, and I still feel shaky inside. There is a truly healthy fear going on, and I'm afraid that in my current state, that I am not a very good one to make any types of decisions about all of this. Jeanette gives Jennifer private investigator Mark Nozak's contact info, Bruce's family members, husband number 3, and Clint's email, Roy's son, husband number 2. Jeanette writes, I want to be a mom first and get my kids safely out of the house and successfully into the world. I don't want them to be in danger or have their mom be in danger, which I think I always will be until this is solved anyway, but I don't want to get her target back on me full force. I also don't want my kids to think I won't stand up for what is right, and I want them to be proud of me, so there is the duplicity again. Jennifer later writes in part, I will try very hard to reach out to everyone you mentioned in the next week and see how we can pursue this story. It goes nowhere. I see in a later email, Jeannie writes to Jeanette that this man is semi-retired and Jeannie does his bookkeeping. She writes, he has tremendous energy and goes all of the time. I have to run to catch up, but I love it. David, Bruce's son, husband number 3, says yes, they were worried too. Jeannie was moving on. But did that family know?
Yeah, there was talk about that at first of, we can't believe that she has remarried, first of all. And then we wanted to warn them, and one of our attorneys at the time said absolutely not. Well, they've told us not to talk about anything. And one of those was we were not able to warn him, otherwise we could, I guess, be sued or something. So I know we had concern for the new husband, but we're always told that that's off limits, that nothing can be done or said. Yeah, don't even know what happened or what's going on in that family.
September 2013. Jeannie and Jeanette are at it again, emails back and forth about Roy accusing Jeannie of poisoning him, her frustrations over this. She says she's at her son Will's house trying to understand how all of this happened. The mother-daughter duo is wondering if they'll ever be able to patch up their relationship. Jeannie writes, I guess I can understand that if you even had serious doubts, you would want to make certain before you would even consider exposing your children to potential harm, or even yourself. I recognize that the circumstantial evidence against me was strong, and that Roy did a pretty good job of convincing you that I was on drugs and stealing and hating him and poisoning him. I recognize that statements I made were either taken out of context or misunderstood many times. I recognize that you were not always treated fairly growing up. I would like you to also recognize that if given the chance to meet with you face to face and to tell you the absolute truth, I would not be confessing any sins, that I would have fear of testimony against me in any court of law. They might not be what you want to hear because I am not guilty of poisoning anyone. Jeanette is forwarding all of this to Falcone, the producer at Dateline. At the bottom of this thread, Jeanette writes, I don't see a point of starting something like that, reuniting, when you are leaving in 14 days anyway. Emails work in South America, but phones and setting up an arbitrator on the phone wouldn't be right. Jeannie, the mom, is preparing to go on another Mormon mission. October 2013. Jeanette says she knows her mother, and a feeling that took over her body, seeped into her bones, was that something was about to happen, something bad. She sends an email to Detective Bennett in Utah, FBI agent Cadiz, private investigator Mark Nozak, and the Kirksville detective who was working with the agents during her dad's exhumation. She tagged them all. It's midnight. The subject line, Jeannie Howard Spriggs, Forgy, Fulford, Sykes, concern. Jeanette writes, Hi, I just wanted to pass along my concern. My mother has been married now for about a year to this new man that she met while she was on her mission. He's an architect from California, and that's all I know about him. She's been acting very strange all of a sudden, including giving the Fulfords back most of what's left of their inheritance with no strings attached. She started writing to me and being really sweet, admitting all sorts of inconsequential stuff to the case, but that still meant something to me. I don't know how to interpret it, but my guess is she's getting her finances in order before they go and getting out of court on things, etc., so that she can link in with his estate somehow. It's based on previous husbands only, not for sure. She seems so happy and reminiscent and looking forward to her mission. They are going to the MTC, which stands for Mission Training Center, in Provo on October 14th. I get this dread that you better keep an eye on this man over the next year if possible. She attaches a blurb from an email from her mom. It reads, We are going deep into the jungles of Guatemala. We will only be about 30 miles from civilization, but it will take 3 hours to drive it. Jeanette writes to law enforcement, I know it doesn't do any good to let you guys know of something in a third world country, but I am hoping at some point, someday, that it will matter. And potentially you guys can save one of these men. 15 days later, Jeanette sends them all this message. As a follow-up to last week's concerned email, I have an update. My mom was driving the car with her fourth husband in the passenger seat on their way from California to Provo to the MTC, Mission Training Center. I don't know the details of the accident, but my sister told me it sounded like my mom was just a bad driver. She drove them off the freeway and flipped the car 3 times. They survived, but I think you should err on the side of caution for this man's sake and due to timing for other strange things going on with her. I called Corporal Bennett's office and Mark Nozak to make a report, but I'm going to make a written record of this also to make sure the information is circulated to you all. Signed, Jeanette. She says her youngest sister, Denise, couldn't even finish sentences when she was telling Jeanette the story. She says Denise was upset, saying things like, I don't know how to explain this. It was just weird. I don't want to say she's a bad driver, but it sounds like it's her fault. It's just weird. That kind of stuff. Jeannie sent an email out to nearly 25 people saying she'd been in an accident, and then sends it to Jeanette, her daughter, separately. Jeannie writes, "Here are the pictures that we weren't expecting would be the first ones of our mission. Actually, this event happened about 2.5 hours after we left home last Sunday on our way to the MTC near Mojave, California. Another car pulled into our lane, forcing us off the road. In our attempts to get back on the road, he was still in our lane, and we went off again, hitting a mile marker and sailing off into the air, where we did 3 flips, landing on all 4 wheels and skidding in the soft sand." A little later, she writes, "Picture number 2 is our first attempt at flying. It shows where the car landed and the tire tracks where it was towed away, but no tire tracks leading to the landing spot!" Exclamation point. Yep, there's 4 pictures attached, a gray Chevy that appears to have taken a roll. 4 weeks after Jeannie's rollover crash, Grandpa Harold Howard Spriggs died. Dennis's dad. He was 94 and had been living in a nursing home in Kirksville. It's now January 2013. For 3 years, he battled a kidney tumor that had spread to his organs. Back then, Jeanette notified the family he was very sick and asked them to send cards. Everyone had abandoned him after Jeannie's crazy campaign. She says Will, her brother, did visit him, and it was very nice. As she's headed to Missouri to bury her grandfather, Jeanette thinks back to a time in 2005 or 6, before the poison suspicions and the FBI investigation, when Jeanette says her mom, out of the blue, asked how Grandpa Spriggs was doing. Jeanette writes this story in Web Sleuths and has told me this story a couple of times. Here, she wrote it in the 26-page report to the FBI. It reads, "She, Jeannie, told me that she was going to Missouri and asked me if my Grandpa Spriggs was still alive. I told her that I'd spoken with him a few days before. She says that she was thinking about going to see him while she was in town."
Is your grandpa still alive? Well, I'm going to be going through Kirksville, and I just don't want him to drop dead when I go through, or people will think I poisoned him. And I'm like, why would somebody say that, Mom? Why? I said, why? She goes, oh, you know how people are. And I'm like, I don't know anybody that would say that, Mom.
Well, during that same time frame, Jeanette was telling her mom about an employee she played a trick on, had helped her with a presentation.
I said, Mom, I did her slideshow, and she came back the next day and she goes, I'm never going to have someone do my homework again. You taught me a lesson, because it was going well. And then that slide came up, and I was like, oh my gosh, I did not just give this in front of my college class. So my mom goes, you should have put in your slideshow that your mom poisons people. And I go, why? Why would I say that? At that time, that was the second time she'd referenced herself as a poisoner in like a week or two. And I said, Mom, you know I love you. And you know you can tell me anything. And this life is a time to prepare to meet God. And if there's something that you've done, it can be made right. So we had a little heart to heart, and I said, do you know what I'm talking about? I go, whatever you've done, I'll love you anyway. And she was sniffing on the phone and like in tears kind of. And she goes, I do know that about you, Jeanette. I do know that. Thank you. And I said, are we clear? And she said, we're clear. Hung up. And that was the last call we had before the one I taped.
Back at the cemetery, Jeanette says the funeral for her Grandpa Spriggs, her father's father, consisted of her, thinking of how his life, her grandpa's life, was worth remembering. Jeannie had told the family that he was crazy and to stay away. And then Jeanette's brother and sister, Denise, showed up. Why were they there, she thought.
I said, oh, wow, you're here. And they said, we came here to see you, not for Grandpa's funeral.
This is the grandpa who would say, you know your mom killed your dad, right? the one who then, Jeanette says, became a target of Jeannie's.
And so as I was sitting at my grandfather's funeral, then I really felt like I needed to be alone. And they were talking about bad things about him. And I said, I would like to tell a story about my grandfather that I think the way you judge a relationship in life is how that person makes you feel about themselves. So I would say he was one of the best relationships I've ever had in my life because he made me feel like a wonderful person always. And then they said, let's go over to Dad's grave now. And that's when they started kind of in on me, I guess, about, all right, come join us in a prayer. And I felt like that was the purpose of their visit. I felt a little bamboozled, but the prayer and the blessing that his grave would never be disturbed, destroyed again by any forces. They sat there, but they said, we're here for you because we know that you loved him. I took care of him all those years. I handled his affairs, and then they said, well, let's go over to the graveyard. Mm-hmm. So it was planned. And they had shared a hotel, and I had my own, and it was definitely a planned event. Yeah.
Jeanette says she was glad she was there. She says her mom had tried to rewrite Grandpa Spriggs's history. She says their mother sent Denise to the funeral home with a piece of paper outlining dates and events about his life. Jeanette says the information was wrong. Wrong birth date, wrong events, wrong relationships, and left out his military service. Jeanette says her brother rolled his eyes and commented that he should have figured it would be wrong, and then made the corrections. A few months later, she learns Chris's husband, Willie, is very sick. The same couple whose daughter battled cancer a few years earlier. Jeanette says she was getting information from Aunt Carol. He had leukemia. Aunt Carol told her Jeannie and her new husband had stopped by Chris and Willie's house in St. George, Utah, a couple 3 weeks before the crash. Willie had been helping Jeannie with her money. I see in an email from Bruce's oldest daughter, husband number 3, she writes to Jeanette during this time, Jeannie changed her estate and had Willie as executor when my dad died. Jeanette writes back, guess who handles her estate now? Willie Heinrich. That was January 2014. In an email from February 2014, a month later, Willie writes to family members. Jeanette's brother forwarded it to her. Willie writes, in my last email, I noted that the doctors couldn't identify my swollen glands with the type of leukemia that I have. Well, last Monday, I visited Huntsman in Salt Lake City to get another biopsy. They didn't want to start treating the chronic leukemia without knowing if the swollen glands was another type of cancer we needed to address. He writes, again, this is a very rare situation and adds complications to the treatment process. Willie was in bad shape for a long time. Then it seemed he got better. In Web Sleuths, Jeanette writes, since this case closed, 3 more people got cancer. A roommate, business partner, a granddaughter, and now son-in-law, leukemia. So Jeanette finds out about her brother-in-law getting so very sick on January 4th, 2014, and 25 days later, Jeannie is writing Jeanette books about Roy, husband number 2. I know I covered Roy's illnesses and his time with Jeannie in episodes early on, but this is where I get the bulk of the information. Jeannie sends off a 7-page letter to Jeanette outlining her version of what happened to Roy. Then, 2 days later, another 2-page letter, more stories about Roy. March 2014, Jeanette is obviously frustrated as she writes a letter to Falguni, the producer at Dateline, saying she feels like this story no longer matters to her, and that interest level and responses are not the same. Jeanette tells her it meant a lot to her to have a pen pal so determined to get this out and justice to be done. She adds that maybe Falguni has her own personal life circumstances that are more deserving of her attention and that Jeanette feels bad even for expressing all of this. She thanks her for the years of caring and wishes her well. Falguni writes back that Jeanette is not alone. Jeanette replies, in part, everyone has moved on and I am still getting disturbing emails. I didn't answer her last one 3 months ago, but now she sounds like a different person and is writing again. This is why I feel alone. I feel like I'm the target of a psychopath, and I have no help and no way to stop it. I just want her to forget about me at this point. Anyway, I kind of stopped writing about it because I realize there is nothing you can do about it either. But you are a former prosecutor and could maybe help figure out a plan of attack on how to get a confession or something that matters. I need this to end someday. It's been going on since I was a young child, and I'm tired of it. Falcone later says that she has some news to tell her. Jeanette guesses that Falcone is leaving Dateline NBC. She's correct. July 27, 2014. Roy Forgey's picture pops up on the Ottumwa Courier website. Jeanette was searching around like she does from time to time, and this pops up. It's strange, for sure. It says Roy Forgey at the top in big letters, and then under it, the Ottumwa Courier. Then this date, July 27, 2014. It's a big picture of Roy's face, with Jeanne cropped out to his right. And that's it. Nothing else. Roy collapsed on the golf course at the end of July. Not sure if it was the 27th, but that's close. 2014. That was years after the collapse, after his death in 2009. It could totally be a glitch in the newspaper's website. I have not called and asked them because I didn't want him to take it down. I wanted you to go see it. Anyway, Jeanette found it weird. It's part of the toll. Could be totally random, a glitch, whatever, but Googling Roy's name and seeing this weird web post with Roy's picture and a July date, it just really stood out. That's all. We can contact the Ottumwa Courier sometime in the future and probably learn it was just some weird, random glitch. November 2014, Jeanette's youngest sister, Denise, and brother Will run a half marathon. Denise, remember, has stage 4 breast cancer. It's one of the things Jeanette brings up when she talks about her sister, how determined, resilient, and strong she was during her battle, during those harsh treatments, how Denise put all of her energy into taking care of her children, 2 boys and 2 girls, keeping a blog, writing a book. April 21st, 2016, crime writer Michelle McNamara died from an accidental drug overdose while working on The Golden State Killer. That goes here. Then in June of 2016, Jeanette and the kids moved to Texas. Jeanette files for divorce from Matt, and she started her job at the college. It had been a long while since Jeanette heard from her mom. Then, on Jeanette's birthday in 2016, Jeanne sent an email. She informs her Aunt Carol's relative passed away, gives an address in case she wants to send a card, and then wished Jeanette happy birthday. She ends with, "I'm really happy you got a good job and are in Dallas. Seems like a good area. Hope all is well with you and your girls there. I'm doing well with my spinal cord stimulator." She heard her back. "Not having pain all the time is wonderful. I'd love to hear from you. Love, Mom." Jeanette thanks her and suggests that they try to talk about the past if they're ever going to have a new normal. Jeanne replies, "I'd like to do anything that could bring this stalemate between us to a close, if at all possible. I know you are busy, so I won't expect instant. Glad to hear things are going well." And then it goes to shit from there. It ends with the email from the last episode and then going back and forth on abuse allegations. Then we hit April 23rd, 2018. Denise died. She was 44 and living in Utah. She battled breast cancer for more than 7 years. Jeanette couldn't go to the funeral. Her mom would be there, her sister Chris would be there, her brother would be there. Her heart was broken. In steps her lifelong friend Rayanne. Rayanne gathered up Jeanette's children and took them to the funeral. Here we go.
We first went through the line and gave my condolences, and it was nice to see her. Gave her a hug.
Rayanne says Jeanette's kids were uncomfortable.
And so I was trying to be very mindful of staying in a place that would keep them feeling a little more secure, but they were really worried. But at the dinner, she came over and she was right away wanted to talk about how she had not done what Jeanette was saying, and it was just terrible that Jeanette was saying things basically to break up the family. She was trying hard not to say Jeanette was lying, but it was kind of one of those things where I hadn't brought up the topic, and she just came over and just had to defend herself and tell me what a good place she was in with her new husband. And all the good things that were going on in their lives. Yeah. And it was a little bit uncomfortable. Chris was a little uncomfortable. I think once she realized we weren't there, I wasn't there to bring up any of that kind of thing. We were there to honor Denise's life. And I had the opportunity to bring Jeanette's kids there, that it seemed to be a little bit okay.
Rayanne says there was someone missing from the mix.
And I was sad that Chris's husband wasn't there. I knew her Willie from back when we were all in high school going to those dances together, because he was from Jeff City, and he was not doing very well. So he had not been able to come up for the services.
So let's talk about Chris's husband, Willie, again, the one diagnosed with leukemia. Jeanette's brother told her Willie could barely walk on his own as time went on. He was very sick. She says the day of Denise's funeral, he was life-flighted, flown to a hospital because he'd become so ill again. I've seen pictures of him before he was so sick. Some of him in running competitions, healthy, strong, smiling. It's always so chaotic. Jeannie's daughter is being buried, and her son-in-law is so ill, same day. I don't know if Willie's cancer and Denise's cancer were spurred by something other than bad luck, but the toll on Jeanette was that the chaos wasn't ending. She was removed from the family, moved to a different state, started a new life, and yet people she cared about were still sick and dying. It just never stops wearing on her mind. Something I'm adding here. Willie died as we were making this project. Jeanette thought he'd gotten better. So Denise, her sister, died at 44, and Willie was 55. Jeanette's heart was again broken. Jeanette and Willie dated for years before he married her sister Chris. And Chris and Willie had 8 kids. They're now grown, some are married. I'm able to see Facebook posts about him from some of those children. One daughter had a post from 2014 how she'd been sent home early from her mission because her dad had been diagnosed with 2 rare forms of leukemia, how doctors told Willie he wasn't going to live, but he did. Jeanette wrote me saying Willie was the only one in his family to have anything like this happen. 5 siblings, all healthy and fine. How Willie was the healthiest because he ran so many marathons. Jeanette was on edge. Was her mom going to call to deliver the news like she did with Aunt Carol not even a year ago? It took a week, but boom, yep. Jeanette sends me a screenshot of her phone. Her mom did try calling her. She did not leave a message this time. Willie's obit in part reads, despite several years of serious health struggles, both during and after cancer treatment, Willie continued to bring joy to the lives of those around him. Willie had a great love for his family and spent as much time with them as possible. He is loved by everyone who knows him and will be greatly missed. Friends from Utah and Jefferson City wrote lovely things about him in the comments. Jeanette wants to address what she says are omissions. Things that are missing or left out from these stories. What is not done? What is not said? She says these are equally important in getting to the truth. We start with her. Jeanette wonders what it would have taken for her family to rally around her. There was never an intervention for this once beloved woman in their family. According to their mother, Jeanette had multiple sclerosis she couldn't shake, lupus, was dying, making up her own illnesses, bipolar, schizophrenic, criminally insane with Munchausen's, accused of poisoning her own daughter and blaming it on her mother. But no one from her family stepped up and tried to help her after all these allegations from their mother. Someone they all loved for so long, with so many of these alleged afflictions. And no help. Matt says this was such a hard thing to watch. The more Jeanette tried to shed light on people she loved getting sick and dying, the more of an outcast she became to her family.
She tried to convince her family, and her family basically disowned her and made fun of her, and she had to, it was very hurtful to her because she was like their mother. So growing up, she's the one that erased them because her parents abdicated that to her, and so it was just heartbreaking. But like I said, she's very determined.
Jeanette says another thing. Where was the compassion?
Where was the outpouring of love for the families of the deceased? That's a glaring omission. Like, where was the compassion for Bruce's family? Their father died. What about Roy's family? Roy died. What about her own family, her husband, her brother, and her parents? Did she ever need a break just to mourn? Did she ever need to just go off and have a little breakdown? I mean, Aunt Carol became an alcoholic. This is the strongest, maybe the strongest woman I knew. This broke her and she couldn't stop drinking. Where's my mother's breakdown? Is she ever just sad? I mean, these omissions of emotions, right? Was she sad that I was handicapped? Was she sad that I almost died? Actually, quite the opposite. So, crickets on those emotions that were omitted.
Jeanette says this one is the biggest one. And when you stop and think about it, I have to agree.
Another glaring omission for me was, how do we explain all of the events that happened? The explanation for all of these things that happened was that Jeanette went crazy. That's the explanation. Oh, Jeanette went crazy. She made all this up. Well, if I'm not crazy, and I'm going to put forward that I'm not, then what happened? It's omitted. Why the stealing? Why the forging my name on credit in her behalf? So many forgings on that. Why the lying, the enjoying being around sick people? Why make up illnesses for me? Why tell doctors that I have results on medical tests that are lies? Why the lack of empathy and emotion? What's the crap in her salt about? If I'm not crazy and I'm not a liar, I saw something. What was that stuff? There's an omission there. What was that? The answer isn't just that I went crazy, because I saw what I saw.
These are just some of the things she thinks about looking back, outside of the chaos. Jeanette says with all of this laid out, she sees her mother's main priority through the years was reconstructing people's stories. Take her own challenges. Jeannie first trying to convince Jeanette she's sick, then Jeanette getting sick, convincing others in the circle Jeanette is crazy, and then isolating her from her family by controlling stories that weren't true. Jeanette says she can apply this method to husbands number 1, 2, 3, and her grandpa. Her mom isn't done yet. Her mom calls her. It's a birthday call. Next time on The Toll. Poison control.
He goes, okay, this is getting serious. Our daughters are getting stalked by this creep.
And yet, of all of the kids, you were really the only one who was ever very sick.
I never suspected it was my father, ever. But years later, I have no question it was my father.
I really don't understand how it could have happened.
Thank you for listening. The Toll Podcast, Season 2, Poison Control, is a production of The Toll, LLC. Creator, investigator, host, and audio producer, me, Nancy Simpson. Executive producer, Pamela Shelby. Original intro and recording by Jay Lashley. Special thanks to Shelby Powers for assisting with web design and original brand identity. Music by Fesleyan Studios. Reproduction or any part of this broadcast without the express permission of The Toll, LLC is prohibited. Get updates at our website, thetollpodcast.com.